All right, good afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining us today. It's about a minute after, so we'll go ahead and get started here. All right, so I'm Marissa McCoy, and I'm the VP for Diversity Affairs for the AFCEA Lexington Concord chapter. Today we're going to kick off our New Horizons virtual diversity speaker series. And Mark Crouter will be joining me shortly, and he'll guide us through a workshop on developing a personal user guide. So Mark is a career and leadership coach at MITRE. He's been at MITRE for over 16 years, where he's worked in various different roles, and he now focuses on coaching and leadership training. And Mark has created this workshop so that we can all build our own, quote, user manual. So it's a guide to help us and better understand our superpowers, how we work best, and what we need from our teams so that we can feel included and can produce our best work. Before we get started, I do want to give a big shout out to MITRE for sponsoring this kickoff of our virtual diversity speaker series. So thank you, MITRE. We really appreciate your support. I also want to give a shout out to Mr. Steve Ober, who has joined us on the line today. Mr. Ober is the new Chief Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Hanscom Air Force Base, and we really look forward to working closely with Mr. Ober and his team as we champion diversity inclusion initiatives moving forward. So thank you for joining us, sir. A few logistical things before we get started. If you have a question, you can use the question feature, and Ryan will be monitoring that window throughout the session. And everyone should have also received a worksheet from Ryan via email. And we'll go through that worksheet today. It's not a big deal if you don't have it, because if you didn't receive it, you can access that worksheet under the handouts tab on your screen. And that tab is just under the questions tab. So this is going to be a very collaborative session, and we're looking forward to you being involved. We want to hear from you on questions that we'll post throughout the session as you build your user guide. So to get your responses, we ask that you go to menti.com on your computer or phone and then punch in the code listed at the top here, and it'll allow you to access the software that gets us your feedback on the screen in real time. So we'll give you 10-15 seconds or so to navigate to the Menti site. Again, it's menti.com, and the code is 5885014. And that will allow us to get your responses throughout the session. So I'll pause here for a moment so people can get there. All right, go ahead and move on. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out. So to get a sense for who we have in the session, let's have you answer the question posed on the screen, answering from which sector you're from. So government, industry, academia, or other. All right, very good. Pretty diverse crowd here today. About 13 responses. If folks want to, any remaining folks want to just punch that in real quick if they haven't already. All right, fantastic. All right, so today's session is focused on practicing building out a personal user guide. And so this is a tool that can be used to build trusted relationships and identify best practices for how to best communicate and collaborate across teams. So the importance of building high trust teams, I think, really can't be stressed enough. So a team or an organization's ability to harness the potential of its people and also their willingness to share their knowledge or ideas or counter views is really critical to improved innovation and the team's success. So this includes honest and transparent communication, defining goals you're trying to achieve, and then really seeking out those different points of view. So it's important to draw people out so that they feel comfortable sharing. And because we all communicate very differently, it makes it even more important. So Mark is going to walk us through this exercise to help us better understand our individuality and appreciate our own and others' uniqueness so that we can create more inclusive teams that can then drive greater impact. So now I will pass it over to Mark.
Great, thank you, Marissa. Really happy to be joining you all today, wherever you happen to be in the cyberspace. As she said, we did share the personal user guide via email and via a link in the control panel, but if you don't have it, don't worry about it. All you'll need is really something to write on, something to write with, so that you can participate. And then, and the reason for that is we're going to ask you to submit your responses through that same Menti interface, and the slide that elicits the responses isn't going to be up. So make sure you got something to jot your ideas down, and we can share them interactively. Okay. Also, before we get going any further, one short disclaimer that the views expressed in this presentation represent those of the presenters, i.e. me and Marissa, and they're not necessarily the views of the MITRE Corporation. So we've got that out of the way. So let's talk about what makes you and other people unique. So our personalities, your personality, includes many, many characteristics that psychologists have identified, sometimes classified as primary, secondary, organization, and cultural. You see those in the concentric ovals on the left side of the screen, okay? And the primary one are things that we often think of as identities, right? We have age and race and gender and ethnicity and so forth, but we are so much more complicated than whatever those attributes convey. And when you layer all those characteristics along with your background, your expertise, your attributes, your talents, it's no wonder that your uniqueness is actually hard to capture and describe. But we are going to try to capture that and describe some of your and each person's uniqueness in a way that you can operationalize. And by operationalize, I mean you can actually do something with that description. That's why we call it your personal user guide. As Ryan's note said when he was publicizing, if you came with a user guide, what would it say about you? It's a guide to how you work best with others and how they can work best with you, okay? Like any instructions that come with a new tool, application, or gadget that you want to get the most out of. Okay, let's go on. So why might you need this? Well, we all serve in a number of different roles. Whatever role you're in, whatever role you might be looking for, finding the right role and really succeeding in that role requires first that you understand yourself and be able to speak authentically and credibly about yourself, how you work at your best, how you work best with others, how they can support you in being your best. So this is a lot more than a resume, which summarizes what you've done, but it really doesn't tell how you've accomplished what you've done through your unique combination of talents. And those are talents that can be applied in your current role or any situation, including outside work. So this exercise is a way to capture some of those ideas, share them in a very simple, structured way that you can create and recreate. I like to say we're all works in progress, and so our personal user guides can be works in progress as well. You are the expert on yourself. That's the key here, right? No one can know and appreciate what you bring to the workplace if you can't articulate it yourself. And sharing honestly what you know about how you work at your best isn't bragging, it's not blowing your horn. It's basically, I want to tell you, if you remember nothing else, it is a service to other people, your managers, your colleagues, your subordinates, anyone else you work with. It's a service to them to be able to understand one another better so you can create those stronger working relationships, okay? So this little tool gives you some grounded ideas and talking points so you can actually share what you know about yourself as the expert on you. Okay, we're going to get started. So if you haven't loaded the worksheet, if you have downloaded the worksheet, this is what it looks like. If you haven't, these are the blocks we're going to go through to fill out for each of you, okay, for yourself. The Word document actually has text boxes you can type in, but again, a piece of paper and a pencil is all you really need at this point. And if you want to fill it out later, you can always download it from that link. So what we're going to do in the next 20 or 30 minutes is complete each of these blanks with direct, honest information that you would want someone else to know about you at your best, okay? So a brief word about these, and we'll talk a little more detail as we go through them. So starting in the upper left, my top talents, what you bring to every assignment, every task, every role. So I'm going to give you a short pick list, and you can also come up with your own talents, right? In the upper right, your background and expertise. This is more than your resume. It's what you most want to be known for and where you want to do most of your great work, okay? Next down, you get the best of me when, you get the worst of me when. These are the conditions under which you are likely to be engaged energetic and successful, or conversely, least engaged, least energized, and least likely to be successful. Okay, conditions and behaviors. You can count on me. Okay, so these often stem from your primary talents and their behaviors that you can reliably bring to every engagement, task, challenge, or role, and different responsibilities, your kind of core competencies, if you will. What I need from you, this can be a tough one. Okay, so we're not often expected. In many cases, we have not been trained to ask others to support us. But it's really important to be able to tell people the kinds of things that help you work at your best, things that can complement, support, or even challenge you. Okay, and then finally on the bottom, what it means when I'm silent and what my scheduling considerations are. Silence can often be misinterpreted, especially if you, like many people, can be reserved and thoughtful, and maybe you're more inclined to raise concerns or questions in private than in a group setting. And finally, your scheduling concerns. Now, all of us have personal commitments. We need to be able to have some autonomy on our own schedule. And one of the things that really contributes to our effectiveness is when we can focus on one thing at a time, whether it's professional, personal, family, or other priorities, okay? And before we're done, we're going to invite you to share some of your observations about yourself. But I recognize that some of these insights may be things you're not quite ready to share publicly. That's okay, all right? If you capture some of these ideas just for your own use, you can decide later what you're comfortable sharing, okay? So let's start working through our top talents. Now, we're going to go through each of these and ask you to fill out your own inputs, right? And this is a list of traits on the screen that are the kind of things that can serve you well, all right? I will say you may be many of these things, all right? But I want you to focus for a couple of minutes on what characterizes your best work almost all the time, okay? And especially those characteristics that help you do your best work uniquely, okay? So go through the list, pick maybe 3, 4, 5, or 6, all right? And write them in the top section of the user guide or on a piece of paper, all right? While you're looking at the list, I will point out that some of you may have taken personality assessments about what your talents are, things like StrengthsFinder or Myers-Briggs. Maybe you've gotten those results or some specific feedback you've gotten about your personality, your aptitude, your interests. You might have some insight there, but if not, just use your own sense of what you do best, okay? And pick out 1 or 2 that you'd like to share with the group online. In just a moment, we're going to be asking for your input. We'll hold here and let you review the list for a few more seconds. Okay, the things you're most known for and you want to be known for. Go ahead, Marissa's going to guide us through each of these inputs.
All right, you can see on your
3 blanks.
Yep, on your Menti screen, you can fill in those words there. And as people start to add their data, it'll develop a word cloud. And so of course, the larger text means it's a word that has been used by more people, and the smaller text is used by fewer. All right, we have some few responses coming in. Okay. Yeah, so a pretty diverse group here with a lot of different kinds of strengths. You know, I think as I'm watching this, begin to populate it, a word cloud like this would be really interesting, I think, for teams to use this exercise, because you really get a good visual of the strengths of a team, and also maybe it's an opportunity to identify some gaps where you can pull in a teammate with complementary talents to really better round out your team.
I think we've got about 15 responses. I know there's probably almost 30 people online. If any of you missed the Menti code, it's still at the top of the screen, 5885014.
Give it a few more seconds if anybody else wants to add. All right. Okay. Very good.
Okay, dependable, positive, helpful, great. So background and expertise. This is more like what your resume would say about you, all right? But again, in the present, not necessarily things you've done in the past and aren't as important to your present identity, right? But these are areas that you might claim, or maybe you can make up one that fits you better than these. That's why I've got a blank on the bottom right, okay? This is from a list of job families and specialties that we use at MITRE, but I imagine many of the people who are AFCEA members would have very similar ones, okay? Pick 1, 2, or 3, write them down in that block. Again, the kind of work you most want to be known for, the kind of work that you want people to come to you for, and the things where you can really claim expertise.
I'm gonna give it another couple of seconds so folks can write down things, and then I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah. Unlike a resume, you don't want to just throw everything on the wall and hope that it gets picked up by some keyword scanner, right? You want to focus on the things that you uniquely bring out as your best work.
All right, go ahead and move forward, and you can start to populate the mentee. All right, great. Communications, we have some marketing folks on the line here. Quite a few intelligent people, that's great. Project management, excellent. Nice.
As this populates, you really get a sense of the diversity of just this audience of about 25 or 30 people.
Right, and I think that also it's we often build teams that's usually around a specific background or expertise, which obviously makes a lot of sense. But I think it's also interesting to think about pulling in someone with a completely different background who could possibly offer that fresh, unique perspective. It can maybe, create connections that folks on the team might otherwise not have made because of their different lens that they're looking through.
Yeah. Gallup has done research on successful teams, and that's exactly one of the things that they point out, that successful teams have to have a broad range of talents and skills and abilities to deal with all the complexity and ambiguity that's in many of our work challenges.
Great. Yeah, it looks like we topped out at 26, and project
Excellent.
Management, administration, and marketing being some of the top expertise. Great.
All right, let's go on. So I talked about the best of me and the worst of me, okay? These are the conditions and the behaviors under which you do your best work or which you don't, okay? And these are some examples that people have actually shared with me as a coach, all right? So I want you to kind of read these, but don't be constrained by them in any way. If you have other ideas, then bring out the best in you and bring out the worst in you. By all means, jot them down so we can share them online. I want to say one special thing about that thing at the top. I've included micromanagement because that is one of the things I hear most often from people that I work with. They don't want to be micromanaged. I'm going to offer you a couple ideas about that one specifically, because if you're thinking about writing that down, here are two things I would share. First, micromanagement is always in the eye of the beholder. That is, it's very subjective, okay? It's not a behavior. And second, people that you think are micromanagers either don't know they are, or they always have good reasons. They might tell you things like, I'm detail oriented, or I need to ensure high quality, or I have knowledge other people don't have, and so forth, okay? So if you feel like you're being micromanaged and it brings out the worst of you, you're not alone, first of all. But I want you to think about the behaviors that you consider unnecessarily constraining, not just don't micromanage me, all right? Let's take a minute more or two, and I'll allow you to fill in a couple of ideas under each of these. I will also add that some of the things you listed as talents and areas of expertise might lend you some ideas about this. You know, so if you picked a creative as one of your talents, right, there are certain aspects about your work environment that allow you to really use that creativity, and maybe some that don't. So think about what you put in there as well.
All right, give it a couple more seconds and then we'll move on to the next chart. All right, so you can go ahead and insert your short answer, and you can put down multiple things if you'd like. All right. But I have time to think before actually doing a task. Very good. An agenda, great. Nice, when I'm on a time crunch. I know that can often be the case, right? When you're forced into a timeline, it can sometimes get you at your best. Great. Allow me to try to figure it out first before asking for help.
Yeah. And by the way, some of these could show up on the worst of me. Some people might think you get the worst of me when they're in a time crunch.
Right. You empower me to make my own decisions. Nice.
Understanding why we're doing it, yes.
That's huge. All right, quite a few on, letting me know what the challenge is and giving me an opportunity to figure it out. That's great. You do with your peers, right? Very good.
Yeah. If you have a job that you're required to sit and work alone and you can't engage, that's not going to be a great job for you.
Right. Yeah, and as you're writing these, think about who else, to Mark's point, who else might need to be hearing this? Who might benefit from knowing this about you? Sometimes we think that it's intuitive or folks should know, but it's often not. And so ensuring that others know about it and just being upfront, I think, makes for more productive collaboration also. All right, looks like we topped that at 27, so I'll go ahead and move to the next one. Folks can go ahead and start to use Menti to insert their responses there.
Yeah, and not necessarily the opposite of what you put in the first block.
All right, talk down to me, yeah. Questions are too big, tedious tasks, right? Yeah, a lot of
micromanage.
Yeah. And also a lot of given a task without, what's the impact? Why am I even doing this? I think that's one that we've seen a few times. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Several micromanage. Yeah. I'll value my experience. You want to check in every day or every couple of hours. Let me do my job and trust that I can do it.
Yeah. Those are opportunities for negotiation, right? To be able to figure out if you feel like you're being micromanaged or not given enough trust. What does it take for you to feel that you have the autonomy that you need? And what does it take for the person who's maybe looking over your shoulder to get enough confidence to give you that latitude? Excellent.
These are great. Okay, perfect. We'll move on to the next slide.
Terrific. Okay. So as I mentioned, you can count on me. This is the stuff that your kind of core expectations of yourself and that you want people to expect of you as well. Okay. So whether you're a leader or a teammate, not just task-oriented behaviors, at MITRE we do a lot of research and analysis and writing and presenting, and those are important. But what you can count on me to do also include things that you do to help foster collaboration and understanding and communication. A term I don't much like, soft skills, right? Because they're really so essential for teams to be effective. Are also things that people can and ought to be able to count on you to do if that's one of your talents, right? These may actually reflect some of those talents you put in that block about what you do at your best, okay? And again, these are actual examples that people have shared with me. So I want you to think about how you do your best work, write down a few things that you want people to know you're going to be able to be counted on to do. And again, in a minute, we'll give you a chance to contribute. As a hint, these should be verbs, not roles, actions, behaviors.
Again, we'll give you a few more seconds to jot something down. All right. What can you count on me to? Nice. Do what needs to be done. Be reliable, honest, and direct. Great. Meet deadlines. Go the extra mile. Be a team player. Competency.
And some of these might feel like they're, who wouldn't want to be known for doing these things? But some of them might be more unique to you,
Right. It may seem like sometimes it's clear to teammates, what your skills are, but it may not always be apparent where you really thrive or what your real superpower is. What is that one thing that your teammates know that you can go to, that they can go to you for? I think that can be really powerful in a team.
Yeah, like that background research, the nitty gritty. Again, some people run screaming away from that. Whoever wrote that, it's like, no, give me more of that. That's what I want to do.
Right. And actually, I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they were saying, I take on this task because I don't think anybody else wants to do it. And they're not particularly good at it, maybe. But then they realized that someone else on their team actually loves that task. So a task that maybe you don't like or that maybe you're not as good at, there's maybe someone who it's not apparent, but they love that task. And so it could be an opportunity for someone else.
Yeah, excellent.
Well, persuade others if the action is sensible and ethical. Good. Provide status updates. Report problems that I cannot solve without your help early, not toward the end of a project. Go the extra mile. Yeah. Nice. Very good. These are great.
Well, I really appreciate all of your individual reflections here. Thank you.
All right, very good.
Okay, what I need from you, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of hard for us sometimes to know what kind of help to ask for or how to ask for it. But if you can learn to do this, you and your teams will be so much more effective, I promise. No one is great at everything, and no one should have to be. And the more aware you are of how you work best with others, the more you will see ways to support others and have them support you. So again, here's a list of examples people have come up with, and they can be examples of things that reinforce our strengths and talents, or balance them, or maybe just make it easier to put our talents to use. So as you write your own ideas, visualize who you might be able to share these with, the you in what I need from you, okay? These may represent some things that perhaps you have gotten from others in the past and appreciated, or possibly things you'd like to get and you're not getting as much as you'd like to, okay? Finally, understand that these requests, these asks are fairly general. And as you're discussing them with people, you may actually need to explain to someone what you mean by things like clear deadlines or short-term feedback or communication. Those can be a lot of different things. So I encourage you to consider these as the start of some very valuable conversations, not as an end or simply a declaration or a talking point. So by now you know the drill, write down 1 or 2 things that you'd be interested in sharing once we bring up the Menti screen. And again, I want to acknowledge that if this is hard for you, write down some things you'd like to be able to ask of other people, even if you're not really ready to share them today, right? But this first step, figuring out what you would most value in terms of getting help in being the best you can be, might give you the confidence to, ask for what you need and identify who to share these insights with. So what I need from you.
All right, great, yeah. Regular constructive feedback. Great. A lot of trust. Right. Acknowledgement of a job well done. Right. It's true. A simple thank you does go a long way. People are working really hard, I think, especially now, working from home. And so an acknowledgement that they appreciate your work, I think, certainly does go a long way.
Very true, very true. Giving effective feedback is a skill to be learned as well. Many people think they don't get very good feedback, but they haven't really been trained how to deliver it.
Support and career development. Excellent. Reason behind the yes or no, right?
Yeah.
And acknowledgement of achievements. B. Honesty, trust, and respect, right? A lot of trust. Also, I mean, clear and open communication, I think is something that everyone, when you don't have that, people can guess what's happening. And so that's, I think, one of the big reasons to have that clear and open communication. And this is kind of that first step that, by listing out what you need and having that conversation with a teammate or with a supervisor, I think it takes the guessing out of what you actually need and lets them know up front, which I think could be hugely impactful for folks and teams.
Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of great ideas here. And again, this is where you start the conversation. So if you're asking for support and career development, what is most important to you now? If you're asking for, understanding, how is that conveyed that you really can value it? All
These
right,
are great.
excellent. Okay, so the last couple of blocks, these are a little bit of kind of a logistical situation, right? My silence and my scheduling. We're just going to take a few seconds on each of these, okay? Write down on your worksheet what you'd want someone to understand if you're not speaking up in a meeting. And that's especially important nowadays when so many of our meetings, just like this one, are not face-to-face, and we might need to make a deliberate effort to check out and to make sure that others are being heard, right? I know some of these examples might sound a little facetious, right? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention, but the truth is that sometimes happens. So sometimes just maybe putting our foibles and human failings on display can be a great icebreaker. At MITRE, one of our corporate culture concepts is the idea of offering grace and respect, and that includes giving ourselves and others some slack when we're not perfect. And let's face it, that's pretty much all the time. In terms of the scheduling considerations on the right, write down what work boundaries you'd like people to understand and respect. Again, this is asking for something that you may not have been given the opportunity to ask for, but you hope people know. And especially in this kind of a 21st century, we have this expectation you're going to be available all the time electronically, wherever you are. And I think we need to address this expectation. It's not healthy, it's not realistic, and it's certainly not a norm that respects diversity, okay? So remember, this isn't about being selfish or being a prima donna. It's about understanding how you do your best work and bring the best of yourself to bear. And that needs to be personally sustainable. Whatever your ideas about these are, just jot a couple of ones down.
All right, give you a few more seconds. All right, when I'm silent, it means I'm not happy, I'm thinking. I'll check with you later. I haven't been heard.
Haven't been listened to. Don't want to speak up again. Yeah, that's tough. And again,
I'm sure the
the start of
answer.
a conversation, how to change that dynamic. Get our ducks in order. Yeah, not quite ready. Yeah,
Right.
bored.
Might be
Heard
boredom.
this too many times. Checked out.
I'm listening to everyone else to understand their points and opinions before forming my response. That's great.
Yeah. If you're the person leading or facilitating a meeting, think about all the possible ways that silence might be interpreted. All right. You have the option to make sure that you kind of address that in whatever way is appropriate for the situation.
And silence, sometimes it's probably harder to read too for others, given that we're all online now. You don't have the body language, and so it's a little harder to understand sometimes what the silence means. So it adds an added dynamic in there.
So true. Yeah, some of these collaboration tools allow you to, make a comment, give a thumbs up, a little applause, whatever it might be. If you're in Zoom, maybe you have more options than if you're working in Teams. Thinking, laser focused. Feel the need not to express my thoughts yet. Yeah. Those of you, again, I mentioned Myers-Briggs. If you're more of an introvert, you might really need more time to collect your thoughts and articulate them. If you're more of an extrovert, that might be less of a constraint for you.
Multitasking, yeah. I mean, I think that's a common one right now with everybody's kind of Zoom overload, double booked. Sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
All right.
Might need to ask that question or make that assessment a second or third time. Make sure everybody's heard it if they're not focusing. Yeah. We always want to think the audience is paying rapt attention to us, just like I am right now. Okay, so by now you've got a pretty good first draft of your personal user guide. By the way, shout out to Katie Hellwig for actually getting one done and sending it into us before the session. I don't know you, Katie, but you're clearly on top of this, and I'm hoping you've got some additional value out of it. But whatever you've got, I know we did kind of go through it fairly fast. You can certainly go back, think about it more, revise it, and I hope try sharing it with someone that you trust, and especially someone with whom you would really like to collaborate more effectively, okay? If you're in a leadership or a management role, you might lead your own team through this exercise. Invite them to share what they would like to share. If you do, please make sure you give people the space to share what's comfortable with them, and maybe sometimes hold back what they want to keep them to themselves, okay? But Marissa, I think we've kind of gone through what we needed to. Would you like to do a wrap up?
All right, sounds good. So I just want to really thank everyone for taking the time to not only join us, but to also share your thoughts as you kind of walk through this. And I think the amazing thing about this exercise is that it really allows you to put to paper some of the key things that make you unique and the supports to help you be productive and feel included and really convey those attributes and talents to the rest of your team. So of course you can think about this in the context of yourself and how others engage with you, but you can also think about it in the context of a new teammate, someone you don't know so much about, and then use these same questions to help you better understand them and provide them with the opportunities and supports needed so that they can really feel included and are really doing the best work that they can do. And I think a lot of these questions seem fairly simple, but I think it's huge getting to know folks more deeply. It makes for more inclusion, better collaboration, and it certainly makes for more productive teams. So again, really appreciate everyone taking the time to participate. And we encourage you, like Mark said, to think about how you can take this tool back to your work life and incorporate it into your own teams. I want to thank MITRE again for sponsoring this session. And we do have a bit of time. So Ryan, if there are any questions in the chat box, we can go ahead and take those as well.
There are not right now, but that might be a good opportunity to give a couple minutes to let folks add additional questions currently or now.
All right, great. Questions or ideas of how you might use this in your own life?
Or insights that you've gotten that you perhaps would like to share.
One question just came in, how to address emails and the misinterpretation of tone.
How to address emails and the misinterpretation of tone.
I'm assuming she means, it's hard to understand a tone when you're reading an email that someone might have sent you. You might be reading it with a certain tone that wasn't intended.
Exactly, right. So I think that's part of the first answer to the question. Recognize that A, your tone might be misinterpreted, and B, you might be misinterpreting somebody else's tone, right? So a smart person who's gotten a number of books sold once said, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So no email is ever so clear that it's going to provide complete understanding. And if you recognize that and you have a process within your team or with your colleagues for raising those kinds of questions, raise them in a way that helps to promote understanding. Something like, I saw your email and I was confused about maybe what was behind it. Could we talk about that? Or, I feel like I'm not being heard because I wrote you and your response didn't seem to address my question, or whatever it might be, right? So raise it as a question for clarity. And I think when you develop that habit of raising a question for clarity rather than responding because of irritation, which is frankly a lot of our tendency, right? That then becomes a group norm. That becomes a team norm, that people will give each other that grace and respect to allow that, we sometimes don't write things the best way we could. I also use the ping pong rule. If it's gone over the net 3 times and you haven't resolved it, it's time to pick up the phone. You're not going to resolve it in an email if you haven't resolved it with a reply and a reply.
Appreciate that. A couple other comments coming in here. We got a comment just says, excellent tool, seems so simple but covers so much. Definitely plan to use this with my team. Chuck, thanks for that. Another question here. How do you handle your manager yelling at you? Not perceived because others were there as well. How do you handle this?
Others were there as well is an important discriminator, right? I think it depends, obviously, but if somebody were yelling at me and I felt like it was really yelling, like, I just have to say, I don't think that's an appropriate way to address this. And then you can make a choice. It's like, I'm going to ask you to rephrase that. I'm going to ask you to lower your voice. I'm going to ask you to give me, 30 seconds to collect my thoughts, whatever you feel you need. That's kind of an on-the-spot issue as opposed to what you're putting in your personal user guide. But if that has happened to you before, if it's still happening to you, your best bet is to create another block, like block number 9. Like when someone is yelling at me, this is what I need to do. When someone is treating me in a way that I don't feel is respectful, these are my choices. Having some kind of pre-rehearsed or articulated responses is probably the best way to handle something like that, because thinking it up in the moment often is not our best self. That's a really tough one, because where I work, that simply is unacceptable, and it would not be a norm at all. But I understand that can happen in heated situations. As a coach, I also tend to ask a lot of questions, right? So out of my mouth would be something like, I'm not sure if you realize how you're coming across. What are you trying to get across? What are you trying to get across by yelling? Again, it's not a challenge. It's like, tell me what this is about. And I will acknowledge that is hard to do when you're feeling, under the gun.
A couple other comments here. Just always end messages with my team with your thoughts, please. And also just love the ping pong rule. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. By the time the email's on its 4th or 5th reply, it's lost its use.
All right, so can't actually see the question. Is that all of them, Ryan? Have we covered everything?
One more just snuck in here. Let me see it here. I didn't get a chance to read it, so I'm gonna read it out loud. Here we go. Even though my company is taking measures to try and improve DEI initiatives, they seem to only be doing it for appearances, not actually making any changes. As one of the few minorities in the company, what should I do?
I have some ideas about that. I'm going to defer maybe to Marissa for her ideas first, though.
Oh, I'm going to defer back to you if you don't mind.
Okay.
Being the career coach.
So, yeah, if things are being done for appearances, that is a legitimate assessment in many cases. And I still come back to behaviors, right? Behaviors are more important than what people say. And people are quick to recognize when behaviors don't align with what people say. And so the first thing I would do is model the behavior that you want other people to exhibit, right? The grace and respect, the acknowledgement, and so forth. If it's still not happening, you have to respectfully point out the behavior and be able to say, I see you doing this, and I feel there's an inconsistency with that, right? I heard you say you want to do this, and the words I'm hearing and the actions don't seem to reinforce that. That is hard. That is hard, especially if you're the one that feels like people are not being treated, the way they ought to be. That's a tough one, and frankly, a little bit outside the scope of what I was ready for. But that's my best shot. Look at the behavior, address the behavior in as objective and clear way as you can.
And there's just did Marissa have anything to add? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I think Mark covered it really well.
All right, and then just a couple of the comments here. How about everyone not being so thick-skinned or thin-skinned? Rephrased, how about being more concerned with the mission and less concerned with your one feelings?
Okay, you've touched a nerve there. A great question. If only we could all just focus on the mission and not be worried about our feelings, we could each do our jobs separately, and we would never get an opportunity to be the great team we can be with collaboration and inclusion, because we would be missing a big part of our relationship as people. Okay, and if I have to end on this one, I'm going to end on it, because how people feel about themselves and others is always under the surface. It's never not there, right? The emotions that we bring to our work and our life are honestly the most important core of who we are. We can't separate them from our work. I will say, I could be wrong on this, and you can call me out, but that is a 20th century mentality. That is an industrial age mentality, that we are all interchangeable parts in some big machine. And I hope that we have left that back in 1999 somewhere.
Mark, appreciate that. You know, it resonates with me a bit. I just started reading Teams of Teams by General McChrystal, and it starts off with a quote from Steve Jobs, who was asked what his greatest accomplishment was, and his answer was the teams that he's built. And I thought that was a really respectful answer, so I wanted to share that.
Yeah, and everyone is unique as the members of the team. Okay.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Mark, for answering all those questions so well. And as someone who's worked at a Center for Emotional Intelligence in the past, I think there's a lot of research that speaks to how you can't separate your emotional state from any other part of your life. It drives the way you think, the way you feel, the way you work, the way you interact. And so all of those are very much combined. So there's a lot of great research out there that talks to all of that. Okay, awesome. So I just want to again thank everyone for joining today. We do have a lot of really awesome upcoming talks and speakers. So I encourage you to check out our website. It's listed there, AFCEALexcon.org. You'll see everything upcoming speakers and events and all of that good stuff on there, and it stays updated. So I encourage you guys to join for our next one. These are free. They're usually at lunchtime or before work starts. So I hope you can join us in the future. And so if Mark doesn't have any final closing thoughts, I think that we're good.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks everybody for joining. Take care.